questions are critically important. And people that come in expecting to borrow money easily, it doesn't happen that way unless you're providing cash collateral or something of that nature. It's a difficult job borrowing money. So you need to have your homework done, and you need to be able to answer any question that I might have. You should have projections if it's a new business, and you just need to have a complete business plan. And you and I had that other discussion about business plans, and we covered, I think, all the aspects of it, and it takes a long time to put together a solid business plan. You did them for years and years. I think I told you in the last meeting, I've probably looked at 5,000 projections in 40 years. Some of them are very well done, and everybody has bigger expectations in their projections than they're actually going to accomplish. But the character and integrity, what I'd like to do is give two examples of character based on real life loan situations, if that works for you.
Oh, any way you'd like to approach it.
Okay, I'm going to talk about a poor case of character, which was real surprising, and then a good one. And the one happened in the late 1980s. Four very prominent business people in Norfolk, very well off financially and very prominent in the community, that came to borrow some money to buy an existing upscale men's clothing firm with 2 locations. And they wanted to borrow $750,000 to buy the existing stores and buy the name. Now, the business had been in business around here for about 20 years at the time. So we got all the numbers and everything looked good. And I lent them the $750,000. And the interesting thing was, and we get into the 5 C's of credit right now: character, capital, capacity, collateral, and conditions. So when I look at loans, regardless of the amount, I look at those 5 aspects. So these guys, I thought they had character because I already knew them. They were very, very prominent in the community. They had plenty of capital, both personal and the business had some capital in it that they were acquiring. They had the capacity to pay, both from the business standpoint and personally. And we had collateral in the form of the inventory, the clothing inventory in the 2 stores. And the conditions at the time they wanted to buy the stores were good. The economy was good, clothing business was good, and so on. So I lent them the $750,000. And each of the 4 was guaranteeing $200,000. So everything looked like it was in great shape. So they start operating the business, and after about 20 months, it's not doing too well, and that was attributable to 2 things. Some new competition surfaced in the market, and the economic environment deteriorated. So they were trying to make changes to adjust and compensate for the differences in the economy and the market, and they couldn't make enough adjustments to make sense. So after about 6 more months of that, they decided they'd just close the stores. Well, they still owed me $450,000. So I said, okay, you need to liquidate the inventory and pay that down. So that after that was done, they still had a balance of about $400,000 on their loan. So I called them all into my office, and they came in and sat down, and I could tell right away they weren't happy, and that's what happens when deals don't work. So I said, okay, you guys each need to give me basically $115,000 to pay off the $450,000. And as soon as I said that, they'd already had a meeting prior to coming in, apparently. They all said almost in unison, well, we'll give you $50,000 apiece, take it or leave it. Now, these are prominent members of the community. So I was a little taken aback, and I said, well, that's not going to work. We're not going to do that. You have $450,000. And I said, you have the ability to pay. They said, well, we're not going to. We'll give you $200,000 and we'll be done. So long and short of it was, I thought they had all the 5 C's of credit. And what it ended up with they didn't have the conditions. Conditions changed because the economy changed and competition came online. It wasn't present when they bought the company. And their character, as evidenced by that, was not what I thought it was either. So ended up in litigation. We had to spend money on attorneys and so on. We got our money back, of course, but it cost us some money to pay for attorneys. So this is the case of poor character when it was not expected to work that way at all. So that's one. The good story.
Let me make a comment, if you would. You've talked about a business situation where you came across some prominent business people, and it turns out they didn't have such good character. And,
right.
And I just want to say this. I read the transcripts to our last 2 shows. One was 20 pages and one was like 19 pages. And it just interests me so much to go back and read those. I always try to listen to the shows again before I have a guest back on. But I want to tell you this. In over 40 years, this is what I read. I got it right here in front of me. I printed this page. You did over $600 million in loans in your 40-year career. Secondly, I said $600 million. That's a lot of loans. Yeah, right. Anyway, you said you were extremely fortunate, though, that you only charged off about $2.2 million of loans. That means that people didn't have the ability to pay and you just couldn't get your money. They might have gone bankrupt or whatever, of course. But that's less than a 1%. 1%. And in the banking world, that's about as golden blue chip as anybody can ever achieve in their career. So the story that you just told, it's from a person who just didn't arbitrarily, get fooled. I'm not arbitrarily. That's the wrong word. You weren't naive when you lent these guys the money. You weren't like some young junior banker that got taken by some guys that tried to fool you. But you've once again brought out character. Now, and I know you're going to give another example, and we've got plenty of time left. You're going to talk about some personal situations pretty soon, I guess. But when it comes to credit, you're telling me that the 5 C's, kind of to summarize that, and I got those. I got taught those along the way also. Character, capacity, collateral, cash flow, condition.
Right.
Those are basically the 5 C's. But the number one, it's like real estate, location.
Yep.
Credit, character. Because if you don't have character, you can't get to the next part of the conversation.
That's true. Very true. Good point.
So you got another anecdotal story that you'd like to share?
Yeah, this is a good character story. This was probably in 1995. Had a gentleman come in, once again, well-known individual in the Norfolk community, wanted to start a new venture, a marketing-related venture. And he had good credit. He didn't have a whole lot of liquidity, but he had good income. He wanted to borrow $400,000. So he came in, gave me his financial information, told me the whole story about what he was trying to do, and it made good sense. But he didn't have enough collateral, and there were concerns. And you get a feel for whether a deal is going to work or not based on how the potential borrower describes it. And he did a good job describing it, but there were a couple of missing areas. So I told him, I can lend you the money, but I need something more. A second on your house or something worth at least $250,000, because there is a certain level of risk involved in this deal. And he said, okay, well, I can have my dad guarantee. And by law, a lender can't designate who the guarantor can be. It's against the law to do that. So I said, well, how old is your dad? This gentleman was about 55 that I was dealing with. He said he's 84. Well, you can't discriminate against age, of course. So I said, that's fine if he's willing to do it. But keep in mind, I can't require that he guarantee this deal. So he said, I understand that. So he brought his dad in the next day. His dad comes in. He's in very good health for an 84-year-old. Brought his financial statement. Pretty strong, good liquidity, perfect credit. And I had a huge amount of comfort with him. As soon as this guy came in and sat down, I had a good feeling. So we talked for probably 20, 25 minutes and went over a couple things on his statement. And I told the borrower, sure, with your dad guaranteeing, I'll lend you the $400,000. So that one went through, and his company did pretty well for a year, maybe 15 months, and then the same thing happened, additional competition and so on, somewhat similar to the previous story. So he had to shut the business down. He still owed me $250,000 out of the $400,000. So I said, well, you know what we need to do? And he said, yeah, my dad needs to come in. And you never like people coming in to pay you that kind of money. You do on one hand, of course, because they need to pay it, but you hate to see the impact on them. His dad came in a day or 2 days later. He had a big smile on his face and he had a check in his hands. Well, I shook his hand, sat down. He sat down in front of my desk. And I said, I'm really sorry the deal's worked out this way. And he smiled. He said, no, I don't mind it at all. I made a commitment to you. I signed a legal contract and I honor my obligations. He said, what I appreciate is you gave my son the opportunity to be successful in another endeavor. And yeah, most people wouldn't do that. And I said, well, I did it because of the trust I had in you. And he just smiled some more and said, this is just the way people are supposed to operate. And that was it. I mean, that is perfect character right there. He was very happy because his son had the opportunity and he really appreciated that. But he came in and gave me $250,000 and he had nothing to do with the business, didn't benefit at all from it. So to me, that is the best example of character, one of the best I've ever heard.
That's an amazing story. That's an amazing story. And it goes without saying that the cosigner, when I pulled out my notes for today's show, there's a whole lot of technique involved in how to manage finances when you're having hard times. And it's very pertinent to today's world that we're living in. and people that need to kind of take a hard focus and really watch it carefully. And rebuilding your credit or establishing credit, those are all critical. But if a person doesn't have credit, but they're in a dire situation, and in some cases, it wasn't their fault. I mean, it could have been a downturn in the economy, and there's millions and millions of people right now that's happening to. So it's good that you're probably retired in one sense, because bankers are getting ready to be deluged with, like 90-hour work weeks to try to help you improve. There's no question. But it's more important than ever, all the basics that we've been talking about for years on what you got to do to get ahead financially and establish credit. Do what you say you're going to do. Pay your bills on time. Communicate with creditors when you can't pay. I mean, everybody in the world right now is trying to give advice. Well, just call your mortgage company and see if they'll let you, tell them you don't have any money. What are they going to do to you right now? See if you can get a reprieve for 90 days or something, or call everybody you owe money to a bank loan and say, can I just pay interest and not just principal right now? And the point is, people that go into this that didn't have any savings, didn't have any credit, they have to rebuild. But it's kind of like the world that I live in. People that I work with that are incarcerated and people that have come out of incarceration that are having a hard time, they generally don't have credit. They generally don't have savings, and they generally don't have anybody that's in their corner that would trust them enough to co-sign for them. So my whole program isn't really about financial. It's really not about, the financial, or how do you understand your credit score? No, it's about doing what you say you're going to do. Everything I do is built on that basic premise. I'd like to go back to one thing, and that is, if you like listeners here, if you like listening to the way Don talks about some of his experiences and things, the two shows that we talked about, How to Get a Bank Loan, which is episode 103, and it was an encore on 153, so you can Google 153 easily, and credit, establishing, rebuilding, maintaining. We go over all the credit. We talk about what a credit report's based on and how you can improve it. We give a lot of specifics on those shows. So I encourage you to go back to those shows to get more information. But I will say this, Don, how many millions of dollars corporate for the clients that I was working with that I brought you, would you just throw out there that you think I secured bank financing or banking relationships with you? About how many millions do you think we did with corporate clients of mine?
I would say probably between $8 and $15 million.
Yeah, that's a great estimate. I think that's right there, because we did those spirit ships and we did 3 or 4 of those.
Yeah.
But what I also want to tell you though is, you personally made probably 12 or 13 separate loans to me personally over the years, where I did a refinancing, or you gave me a line of credit, or things like that. And if we total up all the refinancing, all the loans that I did with you, I think I was into the $1.5 to $2 million range in all the mortgages that we redid and stuff. And you were always saying, well, hey, Steve, don't worry, we're going to work this out. We're going to find a way. And several times it required me bringing you a co-signer. I'm glad you talked about co-signer, because that's what my point of this subject is right now. When that young man had his father want to help him get his start in life, your story was absolutely beautiful. Now I want to get kind of personal. I did 2 things in my life with 2 of my sons that you were their banker. My youngest son, Josh, when he was in college, we did a credit maneuver that I want to teach people right now. So let's teach people something that they can use. He's a college kid, and before he got out of college, I opened up a bank account with him, and I think he even had to put up the money. We put $100 into an account. I co-signed a $1,000 loan for him, and we got an interest-free, I think it came out of a savings account that you can do up to 3 withdrawals a month without having to pay a fee. You sent me to your branch. You told me which loan officer, manager to talk to that day. I took my son in, and I don't want to embarrass my son, but the end of this story is kind of funny. We opened up an account, put $100 into it, because the interest on the $1,000 loan at whatever percent it was, with 12 payments over 1 year there, was $80-some. And so we borrowed $1,000 on his. He didn't have any credit at all, none. But I used my credit at the time to co-sign a $1,000 loan with my son. The money was deposited into that savings account. So we had on day one $1,100 in a bank account in your bank.